A market event, I don't think we need to be, because basically the Fed is in a position where they will be hiking. They've communicated that at this stage, so the market's not expecting anything greater. So it's just a question of how many they do over a prolonged period of time to rebalance. So I don't think the market's going to be shocked by the Fed's actions. If anything, some people will be saying they should be hiking more aggressively, but the likelihood is the people that argue that will have the same problem that the Fed had when they were arguing that inflation was transitory. They can't defend the argument strongly enough. The market is uncertain about the medium-term inflation outlook, and I think that still ultimately gives the Fed the upper hand. The market event would be driven if the Fed itself starts to panic, then we've got a problem. But I think the way things are going to go, the Fed effectively has market expectations under control.
Mike, you more than most have watched that US Treasury yield, and we've seen very sharp moves in a short period of time, even over the course of this week. What do you make of where we're perched? I mean, we had the 1.9% handle, we've slipped under 1.8 again. What is it telling us about the growth story stateside and what investors are doing at this point?
Well, the thing is, because the Fed has anchored the bond market so incredibly that it's no longer the bond market is no longer the world's greatest economist. It's effectively taking leadership from the Fed. So I think, and there's an element where bonds are sort of quasi-uninvestable because we know the direction of travel. So on balance, I think the debate that we're having about inflation is also a debate that's effectively being reflected in the bond market, but the bond market doesn't have a way to fully price it in until the Fed gets there. So I wouldn't read too much into to market moves unless we saw the long bond falling substantially and persistently, which just seems totally improbable at this stage. The other is if it's clear that those arguing for sustainably higher inflation and thinking that inflation is going to become embedded, clearly then the bond market will eventually respond to that because they know the Fed will have to catch up in there. Then anyone who thinks the Fed isn't behind the curve will be delirious. So on balance, I actually don't look at much as the bond market because I think the bond market is very, very confused. Whereas in the past, I do think it was the world's greatest economist.
Mike, as we talk about a read into inflation and what central banks are doing, I want to bring up Turkey because we had another central bank meeting, but no change to the benchmark interest rate held at 14%. But there was a strange line here where the bank was effectively citing the increasing geopolitical risks, an apparent reference to what Turkey and its NATO allies and what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. What's the link here? Is that a genuine concern for Turkey?
Well, it is a concern for all risk assets, all emerging markets. Clearly, if an invasion happens, the dollar's going nuts, and U.S. Treasury bonds are going to fall substantially because there will be a flight to safety. Because this is a binary event, and the market can't price in the actual attack. I mean, to a degree, they're pricing it into Russian assets as a risk, but in terms of global assets, the flight to safety associated with an invasion, because we know it's going to lead to some degree of meaningful acceleration from an economic perspective, but it'll also create a lot of geopolitical uncertainty, just period. And Turkey's a little close to that because they're a supplier of drones to the Ukrainians, for instance. But on balance, I think it's just we're in an environment where it's not implausible to see the dollar going nuts and all emerging market currencies coming under pressure if Putin invades. Now, I don't think Putin's going to invade, but clearly we're on a knife edge and waiting to see how these negotiations go. But I think there's some pretty strong arguments as to why Putin is going to settle and de-escalate.